Hey, it's Dave Brown here, host of Now with Dave Brown on AMI. Check out this latest highlight from the show. New research shows that several Canadian cities are not accessible. 60% of public places in Calgary, Vancouver, and Ottawa presented some kind of accessibility barrier to people with disabilities. The Mapping Our Cities for All project was led by the University of Calgary. Dr. Victoria Fast is an associate professor at U of C. Hey, good morning, Professor Fast. Nice to chat with you this morning.
Good morning, Dave. Happy to be chatting with you too.
So I'm a little bit of a nerd. Let's start with your let's start with your methodology. What kind of accessibility barriers were you looking for?
When we rated the cities, we rated them according to different variables, including, so there's the overall rating, and that's one that made it in the news. So accessible, partially accessible, or inaccessible. But then we also looked at tags, descriptions, and photos. But what's most unique about this methodology is that it really embraced nothing about us without us. And we hired over 30 mappers across the country, many of them living with permanent disabilities. And they were our mappers. They were our eyes and ears and wheels on the ground.
Yeah, go a little bit deeper into the folks that you had collaborate on here in regards to the collection of the data.
Well, I guess I should address first Access Now. It's
Of course, yeah.
Toronto that crowdsources accessibility worldwide, and we just said, hey, we need more research. We need to use this data as a benchmark to understand how accessible our cities are. We have the Accessible Canada Act. It said Canada will be barrier-free by 2040, but what's that benchmark? How accessible are we even?
So let's dig into the data a little bit here, because like you said, the top line number, 60% of the cities being inaccessible or partially inaccessible, like that's a jarring number. But I'm curious about what were some of the common barriers that kept popping up across Calgary, Vancouver, and Ottawa.
So common barriers, the main thing is the door. Can you get in the door? Can somebody independently access that business? So is there a stair to get in, or multiple stairs is the most obvious one. But also, is there an automatic door button? Can people get into the business independently if they're not able to physically open the door themselves? And then it went a lot deeper than that. We were looking at some of the tags that we looked at. Were there Braille options? Was there a sign language tag indicating that they had somebody who, that an interpreter could be available by request? So a few businesses have those, and I think it's important to emphasize and share information on those ones that do.
How did you and some of the researchers develop a sample size here? What was the methodology in determining what kind of public places you were looking for?
They were all public-facing businesses at ground floor, so we weren't going into high rises. It was just what was ever on the ground floor there. And then we were looking based on a census term from Census Canada, or a census geography called dissemination areas. And so that is how Census Canada or Statistics Canada collects data and aggregates them to a particular unit. So you're not giving away individual information. So we took those census units of dissemination areas, mapped out which ones had the highest proportion of consumer businesses, and then we hit the ground and started mapping.
I know that, again, the top line data here shows some pretty jarring results, and maybe results that people with disabilities wouldn't be all that surprised by. As someone myself who has a disability, you encounter inaccessibility in a lot of places throughout your day-to-day life. But I'm curious about any positive observations. Were there any spaces or areas or features where these public spaces were actually showing some positive results or positive trends?
Absolutely. So we did some rural mapping just to get a non-city perspective. So our main mapping was in Vancouver, Calgary, and Ottawa, and then we mapped 17 rural municipalities around Alberta. And from those, libraries stood out as a leader in accessibility. A lot of them were accessible to get in. A lot of them had many of those tags that we were looking for, whether it was, high contrast, had Braille options, was a scent-free space, had tactile surfaces. And so that was really great. And another one was a major headline news in Calgary happening is that Calgary was actually rated as only 35% of buildings were rated as fully accessible. This is compared to 48% of Vancouver and 53% of Ottawa, although minor caveat that the Ottawa sample was a little bit smaller. But there's a new community in Calgary that's just been built called University District. It's close to the university. It used to be a field and now it's a thriving urban area. And there was some really good accessibility there. It was built probably 2020 to 2023, still kind of ongoing, and there is some good accessibility. So I think we're doing better. It's just we're stuck with some of this outdated legacy and outdated infrastructure. And maps matter. Maps matter in mediating that information for people.
Also, when you have those cases, those positive case studies that people can look at, that creates templates moving forward, right? Because cities are not static. They're always developing and growing. And when you can point to an area where, hey, they're doing this really, really well through their rebuild or through their retrofit, that can be a template for other cities and other developers.
Absolutely. It's a great template, and that's exactly why we initiated this. We needed a benchmark. If we're going to be barrier-free by 2040, how accessible are we and what progress are we making toward that?
Yeah, you need the information. You need to know the problem that you're dealing with in tangible terms before you start figuring out solutions. Along those lines, what does this research say more broadly about efforts to enact the goals of the Accessible Canada Act? But of course, it's not just Canada. There are plenty of provinces who are on their own journey right now with provincial accessibility legislation.
Gosh, I'd love to see some provincial accessibility legislation in Alberta. Currently, it's just the Human Rights Act or Code. Not a lawyer, so not sure, but I think that provincial jurisdiction, that provincial legislation is really going to matter. Because it has more teeth. So the Accessible Canada Act governs federal things under federal jurisdiction, where our accessibility is built and governed in our provinces and our municipalities. So I think some of those laws there really matter. But what really matters to me for the Accessible Canada Act is that we are prioritizing accessibility. We are saying this is a policy precedent and that we are going to become a more accessible country. And so I think despite the criticism that the legislation has no teeth, that we're setting accessibility and access as a priority.
What kind of plans do you have to expand this research, maybe other major cities?
We want to map the rest of the world. We want to map everything. Maps really are that, knowledge that people could use to make more informed decisions about where they want to spend their dollars. And that really facilitates that. So there are some great resources being developed. But in terms of developing this research, it's just a matter of getting more funding and getting more mappers on the ground.
I know I read the report at accessnow.com yesterday. It was super, super cool to read the executive summary and then dive a little bit deeper into the data, but you may have just tipped the hand a little bit, Dr. Fast. What kind of opportunities are there, and how can folks at home get involved in this project, whether it be more broadly or very specifically?
Yeah, Access Now is a live and living data set. So all of this data is available at accessnow.com. So you can go on and check out their map and check out businesses. So if you're a business owner, check out to see if your business has been mapped. And if it hasn't, add your rating. If it has and it's inaccessible, work toward that. There were some instances, an example where a business had a big planter at the front door blocking the accessible door button. And so what would otherwise be rated as inaccessible was deemed, it would otherwise been rated as accessible was deemed inaccessible. So some of the fixes are pretty easy, so pay attention.
Dr. Fast, thank you so much for taking a little bit of time today to talk about the research. Keep up all this interesting work, and hopefully we get a chance to check in again down the road with better results to report next time.
Yeah, here's hoping. Great chatting with you.
That's Dr. Victoria Fast, an associate professor at the University of Calgary. To learn more about the project and read the initial report, you can visit accessnow.com. That's accessnow.com. Do you want to dive into more conversations like this? Watch Now with Dave Brown weekdays at 9 a.m. Eastern on AMI-TV or download the podcasts wherever you listen. Do you want to dive into more conversations like this? Watch Now with Dave Brown weekdays at 9 a.m. Eastern on AMI TV or download the podcasts wherever you listen.